morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to introduce Paul Mallasch. We're so pleased to have him here. He served as an American veteran in the Army. His testimony, his talk that he would give us today is pretty amazing. As I told you earlier, he does speak several languages. He speaks German, Polish, Russian, and of course English. And so what a great opportunity it is for us to be able to have him here on Veterans Day. And although we should honor him, he's going to be able to talk to us and share with us some of the things that he experienced. And so with no further, I'd like to just introduce Paul and his friend Earl.
I first want to open this up with a prayer. Father, we thank you. I don't really can comprehend why you allowed me this privilege to share what you've done in my life and how you preserved me all these years. I prayed for the school, the teachers, principal, and all the kids. I've been praying for them ever since that first time I came here. And I will continue to do that. Thank you. I'm going to sit down. You mind? I'm going to sit down, if you don't mind. First of all, I'd like to ask you, is anybody here that has a relative, grandpa, father, brother, sister, that's in the service? Would you lift your hand? And knowing that, before I start my speech, I want my friend to read this article that God had impressed on me to write. And I'm not a writer. Matter of fact, when I came over this country, all I could say in English was, yes, no, and get lost.
This is an editorial, a letter to the editor Paul wrote. I am writing this in response to something God has laid on my heart. After watching the war that this country has been involved in and hearing many complain about us being involved in it, I want to thank the soldiers that fought in the Second World War, Korean War, Vietnam War, Gulf War, Afghanistan, and now the Iraq War. If they wouldn't have been willing to put their lives on the line, I would have never experienced the freedom that I have since 1951. Having gone through the experiences as a boy of 9.5 years old and as a refugee because of war, I know what it feels like from that side. Seeing the soldiers breaking into your house, not knowing if you will be shot or not, and all the things that take place in times like this, I realize as soldiers, when you are in combat and you see your buddies around you being killed, a lot of things go through your mind. At times you might do things that you normally would not do. When that takes place, these actions taken will stay with you the rest of your life. I'm writing this to say that to you soldiers, that as a former refugee experiencing all that goes with war, you have no reason to carry a burden that has been forced on you because of the combat situations. I want to tell you there are no words that can describe the appreciation and thanks for what you did. I forgive you along with all the millions like myself. I also believe God has forgiven you. I want to thank the relatives of soldiers that have lost husbands, wives, sons, and daughters. I am one of a million that you will probably never hear from or meet this side of heaven to say my appreciation on their behalf and mine. Instead of people complaining about the war, they need to be praying for the soldiers, their families, and the people in whose country the wars are being fought. War is hard on everyone. Lift your voice toward heaven instead of against the politicians. Allow God to transform people's hearts and minds in the hope that the powers of darkness can no longer influence people's minds. For we struggle against the powers of darkness, not humans.
Okay. So you have an idea from that side of the story, okay? My life actually, I was born in Ukraine, and I lived there until I was 5 years old. I don't know how your history is, but when Stalin made a pact with Hitler to attack Poland, when we lived in Ukraine under the Tsar before communism took over, we had a good life. But when communism took over, we gave them three choices. You either join the Communist Party, be shipped to Siberia, or be killed. And on top of that, I had two brothers, and my dad, they were still old enough to be drafted into the Russian army. So when Hitler made that pact with Stalin to attack Poland, and Poland's war was over in 3 days, we were given a chance to get out, and we took that chance. My mother, my two sisters, my grandma and me, we were on a train, and my dad and my two brothers came with a wagon. They were confiscated at the border. The train stopped at one point, and I was grabbed out of my mother's arms because they felt that I was undesirable. Hitler wanted a pure race. So he got rid of all those that either had sickness or anything. He didn't have no choice of what, we didn't have no choice. And I was supposed to be eliminated. But God had other ideas. Instead, I wound up in a German army hospital in Poland. And I was there for 15 weeks. I became their mascot. And meanwhile, my mom and dad, they were put on a farm, a Polish farm that Hitler had taken all the Polish farms away from the farmers, and they put us refugees on there. And I don't know how it all happened, except God's guidance. After 15 weeks, I joined them on a farm. And it was no picnic either, because a lot of Polish people were still fighting, and we weren't safe for quite a few years. But eventually Hitler and his regime got control of it, and we lived under Hitler time. We weren't safe either, because my parents didn't believe in joining Nazi Party, and therefore we were on the hit list too. If it hadn't been for my two brothers, they were taken into the Hitler took them, and they were in the service for Germany. My oldest brother got killed in Stalingrad, and my youngest brother, he fought in the Battle of the Bulge. He got wounded there. But I don't have too much time to share my story. I could spend with you all day long in order to tell my story, and I still wouldn't be able to cover it. Anyway, we lived there in Germany till January 1945. And they came in and told us we had till midnight to get out, pack up and get out. So we packed up 2 wagons. On the farm we had 2 girls and 2 boys working for us, my two sisters, all year round. And then in spring and the fall, we hired more help because we needed more help. Anyway, so when that order came, we loaded up 2 wagons. My dad, one of the girls that worked for us, and one of the boys, my one sister and me were in 1 wagon. My mother and one of the girls and boys that worked for us, and the other sister, my grandma, they were in another wagon, and we left our farm. If you remember the winter this last winter we had, well, it was a lot worse. When we left our farm, we could actually, the snow was frozen so hard that you could roll over with the wagon. The snow was falling so hard that at times you couldn't see the front of the horses. And now just imagine, I don't know if you ever watched the story when the refugees are moving out. They're coming from all and trying to get out, get away to go to the west, because our aim was to go to northern Germany. And we got separated. After a week, and we got to the first town, because the refugees come every which way, and things were really hectic. Our wagons got separated. My mom and us, we were separated. And we traveled like that for a week. We'd stop during the day and rest the horses for a little bit and have something cold to eat. And at night we would pull over and spend a longer time resting the horses, fixing some hot to eat, and then move on. After a week, we had stopped and just finished our evening meal, and we were getting ready to pull out when a friend of ours came and says, "Have you found your wife yet?" to my dad. And he says, "No." He says, "Wait, they're 10 minutes behind me." And that's how we got reunited. We traveled a week. Now remember, as refugees, when you traveled, we thought we were safe because the German army was amidst of us. We didn't realize that Hitler used the army to move forward for combat. So when the Americans and all the other countries found out about it, they started bombing us. So every once in a while when the planes came, bombs would fall, and they were trying to kill them, and they had no choice. But I also want to tell you that when we left our farm, there's a lot of people in that cold that got rid of their babies, the old people, and you could hear them cry for help. And that stayed with me for many years. It took me till about 10, 12 years ago to work through that. Because I get flashbacks. Anyway, so after another week, there's many incidents where God really saved us. One incident I want to tell you, we had stopped on the top of the hill. I don't know why the refugee column stopped, but we had stopped, and we looked down, you could see this beautiful city about the size of Illyria. And in Germany, every city has 2 churches, a Catholic church and a Lutheran church, because those are supported by the government. And I could still picture those 2 churches. And then all of a sudden we seen the planes coming. The sky was black. And we thought they were coming for us, but they didn't. They hit that, when they got over the city, we seen the bomb doors open up, and just imagine somebody taking a bushel basket full of marbles and dropping them. When that cleared, within about 45 minutes, there was nothing left. But we found out that was God's intervention, because there was a bridge there that they had to get rid of, because otherwise the German army would have been able to move forward. See how God works in people's lives? Even when you don't understand. So we just kept going, and all. After 2 weeks, the Russians caught us. The first Russians that caught us were 2 Kazakhs on horses. They lined us up against the wall, figured we were going to get shot. But my dad, since we could speak Russian and fluently, it didn't happen. But many times, the first time I was stood up against the wall was that time. The second time, when they actually aimed a gun at me, I was wondering, as a kid, I was wondering, what will it feel like? Will I see the bullet? You know, I had never, no inkling what it was. But God intervened. And this happened then, it became routine, just like getting out of bed every time troops came, because the place that we stopped, the Russian government, the soldiers that were fighting, they made their headquarters. And from there, they sent the troops to the front, and then they would come back. And so every time they would come back, when they lost their friends, they had blood in their eyes. They wanted to get even. I remember another time, I picked out 7 times during that whole incident that I should have been dead. The other time was when this Russian soldier, he lined us up, and he was out for blood. He lined us up against the wall, and he had his Tommy gun right around cylinder, and he opened up. Nobody got hit except my mom's ear got creased, and all of a sudden it stopped firing. And he let out a cuss word. He says, "Well, you're going to live another day. I want something to eat." So he told my mom to fix him something to eat. Well, he went to eat. My dad took the gun, opened it up, and the magazine was half full. Now, you explain that to me. The other thing is, I'm skipping a lot of things here. The other 2 times is after the war was over, and the Polish people got their farms back, that's when the hatred was worked out on those that were put on their farms. We didn't have no choice to be put on a farm. But what the Nazis did, they had to have somebody to take it out on. And so if you got, that's it. So when the word came that you are going to be picked up, that meant they're going to come and take you to be tortured to death. And I didn't want that to happen. As a kid, at one point, I tried to commit suicide because I was afraid of the torture. But I want to tell you, kids, don't ever, whatever the reason, take your life. Because God created each one of you personally in His image. and He loves each one of you. I was ready to jump off, and somebody grabbed the back of my neck, and it was my mother. My job in Poland, when we were slaves for 10 months, was to take care of the cows. And like I said, I took the chain from a dog and had it wrapped over her, and I was jumping to kill myself. And all of a sudden, someone grabbed me by the back of my neck, and it was my mother. She never came out there before or afterwards. Why did she come out there? But she sat me down and told me, son, if you would have committed suicide, we would have never seen you again. Because you would have gone to hell. I didn't know that. Even though, because during Hitler's time, we had church in our house, but it was underground. Us kids weren't allowed in the church because they were afraid you would say something. If any neighbor, or anybody that had something against you would say to the Nazis something against you, they'd come and pick you up at midnight, and you would disappear and never be seen again. You didn't have any excuse. So anyway, then when the war was over, May 1st, the Polish people, especially the one that hated the Germans, and he wanted to get even, he tried to kill us. The way it happened, he pulled all the people out, German people. We lived on a long street, and he said, you're going to be cleaning ditches. What we didn't realize until afterwards, that was supposed to be our grave. He was on the horse riding back and forth, and we wondered why every so many feet there was somebody standing with a rifle. Well, he was waiting when we were going to be done cleaning. He was going to give the order, and they were going to kill us. He made his last pass and was coming back. All of a sudden, he fell off the horse with a bullet hole in his head, and there was no gunshot. Now, you explain that to me. Anyway, my time is up. I wish I could spend more time with you kids. But one thing I want to leave you. You know, I seen that side of the thing. And then when I came over this country, I was drafted in a service, and I was sent back to Germany. I was interpreter for Uncle Sam. And so that's why I wear this hat. I served during the Berlin crisis. If you ever studied, what happened in the Berlin crisis, I served through that. And so I know both sides of the story. That's why I could write this. Thank you very much. Thank each one of you. I believe that people today need to know, especially the kids, of what actually happened. There was a Holocaust. And the other thing is somehow that they would get, it would impress on them how fortunate they are living in this country. Because there's millions of people that don't have this, what we have here. And I think we're taking too much for granted. I think the public is taking too much for granted, this country. We were invisible until 9/11. But everything has changed since then. And I just like for them to know what it's all about. And also, I'm alive today because of two reasons: God and my wife. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be alive today. Well, as a refugee, the first time I was, when I was 5 years old, I was born in the Ukraine. And when Stalin made the pact with Hitler to attack Poland, we were given a chance to leave Ukraine. Because if we had stayed, there was 3 ways to go. You joined the Communist Party, or you were killed, or sent to Siberia. Plus, my dad and my 2 brothers were old enough that they would have been drafted into the service. No choice. And so we left and wound up in Poland right after the war. Poland only lasted 3 days, and then we left and hoping to go to Germany, northern Germany. We had relatives there. But what Hitler did, he took all the farmers off the Polish farmers off their farms, and he took us, picked up the refugees coming out of the Ukraine, and put them on their farms, and that created a hatred against us. But Hitler and the Nazi did during the war. And that was taken out, and then after the war. So we left our farm on January 19. At 8 o'clock in the evening, he came and told us that we had till midnight to get out because the Russians were moving. We could see the war coming closer, and we had heard it on the radio because we had an underground radio, BBC. And but as a kid, I wasn't, didn't understand a lot of that, because when we lived in Germany. See, in the Ukraine, before communism took over, we had church in our own house. And then when we moved to Poland, we had church in our house, but it was underground. Us kids were never allowed to be in with adults. So they wouldn't say anything in school because word got out. And one neighbor could accuse you of something, and midnight you would disappear and you'd never be seen again.